I'm so addicted to chocolate. The only drug I'm addicted to is food. Sugar is like a drug to me. Sounds familiar? Well, a lot of people believe that they are addicted to food. Yet the science on the matter isn't really clear. Some say that sugar has the same effect on your brain as cocaine, but is that really true? And if it is, then how can you get out of this food addiction? What is food addiction? When people talk about having a food addiction, they are referring to the loss of control over their eating behaviors in regards to certain foods, and often these are highly palatable, calorie-dense, and low-nutrient foods. Symptoms of food addiction may involve craving these foods even when you're full, binge eating on these foods, or feeling food guilt after having these foods, and continuing all of these behaviors even when you know that they are unhealthy. And I've made videos about a few of these topics that you can find right here. But while all of these behaviors are very real, are they really the result of a food addiction? Is food addiction real? Whether or not food addiction is actually real has been the subject of debate for some time now. Chocolate and sugar, for instance, have always been regarded as foods that cause addiction. There's one study in particular where rats preferred cocaine over sugar that is often cited to reinforce the fact that food addiction is real. If you're interested in this article or the rest of my sources, then you can find them in my blog post, which is in the description. But it's important to emphasize that this study was done on rats, and our brains aren't similar enough to base off our responses to sugar off theirs. And this study also uses straight sugar, which is not something we typically consume, instead of like highly palatable foods. So it's kind of difficult to transpose the results. But it remains very interesting and raises the need for further research. And there are also a few issues on the rats that had been previously, that were rats that were like already pre-addicted to sugar. Well, there's tons of controversy regarding this study that you can check out, but basically this study isn't enough to say that sugar is addictive in humans. And also the components of addiction include both tolerance, meaning that the more you consume a substance, then the more you need in order to have the same effect, and withdrawal symptoms, which means that when you stop consuming that substance, you get some negative side effects. And these have not been shown with food. While some may believe that these food addictions exist, when we look at the evidence for substance-based food addiction, well, it's actually pretty poor. If we look specifically at sugar, for example, no evidence supports sugar addiction in humans. People aren't really directly addicted to sugar, but rather they develop addictive eating behaviors around highly palatable foods. For instance, I know tons of people who would binge on cookies or ice cream, but very few who would binge on straight spoonfuls of sugar. Ultimately, the concept of food addiction is flawed. Food cannot be compared to any addictive substance like drugs or alcohol because, unlike these substances, food is actually essential for our survival. So the term eating addiction is actually more suitable because it describes the eating behavioral addiction rather than the substance-based addiction. While eating certainly can be addictive, food in itself isn't. How to overcome your eating addiction. So we've established that substance-based food addictions aren't a thing and that chocolate addiction or sugar addiction isn't real. However, this does not mean that behavioral eating addictions aren't real, and here are a few ways to overcome them. First of all, you need to analyze your cravings. Are they fueled by certain food restrictions? If so, you really need to let those restrictions go. You need to give yourself permission to eat whatever you want. And like I've said in previous videos, it may seem scary because you may feel that you're just going to end up having junk food for dinner and lunch and breakfast all the time. But there may be a brief period when that happens, but naturally you will adapt to this period, and after a while of having cookies all the time, you won't want to have them anymore. You won't crave them, you won't feel addicted to them, and you'll go on to wanting more healthful, balanced foods. So I made a video on food obsession that you can check out here that may have some more tips that interest you. I want to add that this thing of letting go of your restrictions is mainly addressed to people who really restrict their food intake and have knowledge about nutrition and have generally healthy meals. Because if you're already having junk food all the time and you just stop restricting and just have more junk food, you can see that it's not the way things work. It's a little bit more complicated. I'm talking about people who generally put tons of pressure on themselves to not have certain foods, who see certain foods as good or bad, and who eat mainly really healthy, balanced meals. If you feel like you don't restrict but are still addicted to eating, here are a few things that you can consider. First of all, you might be restricting without even realizing it. You could be thinking about restricting your food intake all the time, thinking that you have to go on a diet or that you have to eat less or do this or do that, but you could actually always end up giving in. And if that's not the case for you, then you've probably been used to having highly processed, high calorie, low nutrient foods and just aren't really used to healthy and balanced eating. In this case, it's important to start off by learning the basics about nutrition, about creating healthy and balanced meals. I have a video about that here, and I have tons of articles and videos on the subject, so please feel free to check them out. The last thing you should be doing right now is going on a diet. It's important to fuel your body correctly with nutritious, healthy, and balanced foods, and make sure that you're having balanced meals every day. If your body is getting the nutrient it needs, then you're less likely to experience these eating addiction urges. Now, while I suggest having no off-limit foods, for some people it may help to get rid of trigger foods, which are the foods that you feel addicted to and that cause your craving or your binges. If your pantry is filled with tempting snacks and you can see these snacks all the time, well then it's easier to give in. So I really recommend having mainly healthy foods on hand. I mean, you're less likely to binge on celery sticks than on cookies. And I also made a video on how to stop boredom eating, which may have some more helpful tips, so make sure to check that out. So this step may or may not help you. Make sure to try out this food clear out and see if you find it's helpful, then great. And if you find that it only reinforces your eating addiction, then don't do it, obviously. And as usual, don't hesitate to seek the help of a nutrition professional to guide you along the way. While a lot of people may feel like they suffer from chocolate addiction or sugar addiction, the actual evidence for substance-based food addiction is poor. However, eating addiction, like the behavioral addiction, is very real. And if you want to let go of that, then you need to start by letting go of your restrictions. You also really need to learn how to make healthy, nutritious choices. And I have tons of videos to help you with that. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like it and subscribe, and see you on my next one. Bye.